Good afternoon. Today I'll be going through kanbanguides.org. Kanbanguides.org, you'll find two guides. One of them is called Kanban the Flow Strategy, and the other one is called Kanban for Complexity. There's also an addendum for different, I guess, implementation details, like what kind of policies you might have and all that kind of thing. So we'll get into that as we get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be at the flip chart for most of this session. Feel free to send me a message. You can join as well if you want to. On the event details, you will see a URL where you can join. You can join the queue to actually ask me questions live here on video. You can also just send comments on the stream, so that's perfectly okay as well. So I think I should just get started, and so I'm going to switch my camera view now to my flip chart, and let's throw a little bit of light on the subject. So I'll keep an eye on your comments and questions as we go along, and just throw a little bit of light on the subject. So Kanban, the flow strategy, is something that Daniel Vicanti and I came up with last year. It's a very, very simple guide. And you can find it at kanbanguides.org. There's a guide, main guide, which is Kanban, the flow strategy. And you're going to see two addendums to that as well. So I want to bring you through Kanban, the flow strategy today. So first of all, it's not really about evolutionary change. This is really focused on delivery, and the focus is on transparency, visualization, flow, and learning. Learning being very, very important. There's a kind of a tricky balance. The Lean UX guys, Scrum guys say outcomes over outputs most of the time. A lot of the Kanban guys would say outputs over outcomes. And for me personally, it's a bit 51-49, depending on the context. For outcomes. I do get the idea of delivering as fast as possible so that we can learn quickly, get with some really short feedback loops and understand what's going on. To use Kanban, the flow strategy, you need to be willing to actively manage work in progress. I see so many so-called Kanban boards with blocked columns. They really horrify me, those kind of boards. I might talk more about that later and why that horrifies me. But more important than that, I don't see any real management of work in progress. In this guide, you could use work in process or work in progress. We just decided 50-50 split. We said, okay, let's go work in progress, because the bias should be towards work progressing in the system. So it was a kind of we went for the psychological effect. So you actively manage work in progress. That means not just limiting work in progress. We'll talk more about limiting work in progress later, but also watching out for any work that might be aging on the system. So keep an eye out for any work that might be aging on the system, so that that work is basically flowing through the system. We use the expression, use workflow policies. Workflow policies, we'll see some examples of those. One example of a workflow policy would be work in progress limits. And we'll see examples as we go through this, other types of workflow policies, but something that's really explicit, that's really written down, usually kind of surrounding the board. If this was your board, you'd have your policies across the top and the bottom or around, and you would make it clear. Because I love one of the quotations from Edgar Schein, the famous guy who talks about culture, and I'm kind of badly paraphrasing now, but he basically said that culture is the shared set of assumptions, written and unwritten. So what I really like about making sure that these are written down is that we're kind of sharing our beliefs, and it helps us to kind of look at what they are and whether they're the right beliefs as well. We also need to avoid local optimization. So I've worked with lots and lots of teams over the years, and sometimes what happens, I discover that there's a team working really, really fast within an overall value stream of maybe 4 or 5 teams, but actually the whole value stream isn't going that fast. So they might be doing a particular step much faster, but their really overall delivery isn't really improving. So we need to avoid what we call local optimization. For those of you who are familiar with the Fifth Discipline book by Peter Senge, there's a fabulous reference to a game called the beer game. Unfortunately, there's no beer being drank during the beer game, but it's like a supply chain game where they have like four. You've got a brewery, then a distributor, wholesaler, retailer, and then you've got Mary coming getting her beer every week. And very simple supply chain. And the last time I did it was a couple of years ago now, actually, and about 50 people playing the game. And it was very, very interesting because what was happening, if you had a local focus, a siloed focus, what was happening was essentially in that game, the brewery had to stop brewing because the distributor and the wholesaler were completely full of inventory because people were reacting too much and over ordering. And so when you have teams just being locally optimized, it's a great way of going out of business. So you really need to make sure that the entire value stream is being optimized. And so if we were to kind of give this a label, we would say, or our slogan, we'd say that Kanban the Flow strategy is a strategy for optimizing the flow of value through a process that uses a work in progress optimized pull system. And we use the word optimized over limited because you could limit the work in progress too much, in which case you might starve the system. So trying to get the sweet spot, what's the right balance in terms of trying to make sure that people work on something when they've got the capacity to start working on that. I'm keeping an eye on your comments as well. So those viewers are online, thank you very much for coming. If you have any questions, just feel free to pop them through. And if you want to join the queue, I see Olu would like to ask me a question. So happy to bring you in after just the next flip page. Thank you, Olu, for coming in. So a very simple guide. Why do we do it? Because I was coming up across loads of teams that claimed they were using Kanban, and they weren't. So we wanted something that, you know what, this is what Kanban is. You know, it's very simple. Work in progress limited. You actively manage your work in progress. You focus on pull rather than push, rather than visualizing what I call visualizing crap on a wall. And it's good to visualize your work. It's good, but you're not really going to improve your system unless you try to change the way work is organized in your team. So I'm going to show you more. So here is an example of a workflow. A workflow is essentially the visualization of your systems, the Kanban board, if you like. And this is a really simple Kanban system. At the very top here, I'm just illustrating that you can decide to measure how long things take between different limits. So for example, here, you might even measure when a work item comes in to the backlog here, to getting to the end of in progress one. Maybe there's two in progress, but maybe some people only care about it getting from there to there for some reason. Maybe this is a supplier or some third party or something like that. That could be one type of cycle time. Now, we're not trying to redefine language. We're very conscious that people have come up with definitions, but when we wrote this guide, we wanted to be clear on what things meant. And so because there's all sorts of different types of label for how long things take, we went with cycle time, but what we did is we put a definition in the back of the guide, so we're kind of being clear what we mean by that. But as such, you could have a number of cycle times from here to here, for example, from here to here. So that's like when it came in, when the customer even asked for it in the first place, to the time that you actually got it done. You could also have a workflow from the time that you told the customer you're going to finish it. So, okay, it might have been sitting in your backlog for a while, but you decide to bring it in. And so you might decide, you know what, we're going to measure from here to here, because it could be all sorts of other things going on this backlog. One of the key points of the backlog as well is that it's, just notice there's a video issue. Let me just check what's going on there. Sorry about that. Not sure what's going on. Let me just check my technology here. Yeah, it's back now. It's just a little blip. Sorry about that. So the backlog here is not necessarily ordered. It doesn't have to be ordered. So that's interesting, and we're explicit about that. We didn't call it a product backlog because maybe it's a service, maybe it's some customer jobs that need to be done. So we just use the term backlog. You don't have to use these terms. This is just a particular workflow where I like using the term selected. Selected to mean that we've committed to the customer we're going to finish. We're going to finish these items. And here you've got. So here we're committing to finish the items, but here is the first actual in progress active state where they're actually really doing work on that. And here there's a second state, if you like. One of the things you'll notice about the cards on the board is a couple of things you might probably notice. One of them you probably notice here in the backlog, I've got some text written on the work items. And by the way, we call these things work items. So we've got a very clear definition of what that means as well. Something that delivers value. It's not something that's broken down so much that it's not delivering value anymore. So these are work items we're looking at here. And you're probably familiar with other methods where you do estimation and so on. And that's great, and if you that works for you, that's fine. But what we don't focus on estimation so much. It's more about right sizing. So very simple. It fits within our normal expectations of how long things take. It's too big or no way. And so if it's too big or no way, we might have to do some breaking down of that work before we think about bringing that work in. Although there may be occasions you do actually want to bring that in. And just about bringing work items in. With Kanban, what we do is we tend to have a policy. You can call it what you want, a replenishment policy. I like calling this the start policy or committing to finish policy. So what are the rules that we use to help us decide which items will come into selected, which items are we going to commit to the customer? So that would be one type of policy. Another policy would be once the work items are in progress, what rules do we use to decide which one do we move next? So we can call it a pull policy or maybe a move policy. And what you probably also notice as well on the cards, we've made it mandatory that you need to say when the item has started and when it has finished. We just have optional extra ones as well. You can get amazing charts. You'll see that in my live stream tomorrow. I'm playing Advanced Feature Band tomorrow with a number of trainers. If you want to tune in and watch that, check that out. But what we can see here is that this particular work item was selected on the 1st of April. So it's now the 9th of April at the time we did this. This item was selected on the 12th of March. This item was selected on the 1st of March. It went into in progress on the 2nd of March. And this one came in very late in March, but it's already in progress too. And it went into in progress one very quickly, and it took a few days, but then it got into in progress two. And this one came in even later. So this is really interesting because we have an item over here that came in on the 12th of March, yet this work item has leapfrogged everything. And recommend you look at Daniel Vacanti's books. When Will It Be Done will be the most recent one. Welcome, Rajkumar. I'll pull you in shortly. So this is a real problem with the flow because yeah, okay, we might be in a hurry to get that item through, but what effect is that having on the rest of the system? So rather interestingly, I've got a simple little chart that I put together here, and it's a work item aging chart. So for the items that are in the system, in selected, in progress 1, and in progress 2, the items in progress 2 are not that old, so those 2 items came into the system very late and got through the system very early, are likely to go out here very quickly. But we've got this item is much earlier in the process, but it's older, so that's a bit of a worry. But these 2 are a much bigger worry because there's 2 items that have been in the system for 30 days or so or more, and that's a real concern. So this is an indication that this particular team is not actually managing, it's not actively managing its work in progress. And so if you want to optimize your flow, one of the charts that we'd be looking at every day, we'd be looking at something like this, where we're looking at the items on the board, and are there any items that seem to be aging more than the other ones? I mean, there might be a good reason why you're deciding to put them in there, but the thing is, in Kanban, when you commit to finish, if you're committing to finish, why don't you just finish it? Because the reality is we don't know how valuable a lot of these items are until we actually get them, not even just getting them to done. There should be even more steps after done, actually, because when we actually get it released and when do we get customer feedback. So that'll be a better workflow where we go right out to customer feedback. And so what happens a lot of the time, particularly when you've got a project mindset, we got these items, we think some items are more valuable than others. The reality is, we know from a case study in 2011. Welcome, Amani. I'll see you in the queue. I'll pull you in soon as well. Thank you. And so it's what we're doing is we're assuming things are so valuable, but we find out actually when we get feedback from the market how valuable they really are. So this is why Kanban likes to get items through quickly, so you can find out whether you got the outcome quickly. So it's not necessarily a binary switch. Outputs and outcomes. There's a kind of a tricky balance there. Another thing you'll notice as well is on the done column, you can see all the dates are filled here. So it was selected on the 1st of April, went into progress on the same day. Wow, that went in fairly fast. So that's good. That's a really good sign of replenishment, actually, when you should really bring something in when you've got the capacity to start it. But I'm not sure they had the capacity. But and then it was done 2 days ago. And this item went in on the 6th of March, but was finished on the 31st of March. So it's very interesting here about the cycle time. So people make kind of mistakes with cycle time. It's based on calendar days, not weekdays. The customer doesn't care about you went on holidays and bank holidays, and there's different countries in the world have different types of holiday. So, and it's not even the done date minus the started date or committed to finish date. You add 1, because if you started on if I started today and finish it today, I don't say the cycle time is 0. I'd say it's 1. So we always round it up by 1. So this one is 7, this one's 26, and this one 8 of April. So you can also have a cycle time scatter plot. So here I've got elapsed time from the 1st of March through to yesterday. And then here's the cycle time. How long is the green cycle time from here to here? Okay. And you can do plot the other ones as well if you want to. So yeah, it looks like 2 items went through really, really quickly, but actually 1 item took a long time. And we know from the work item aging chart that when these guys land, they're going to have really long cycle times. Welcome, Monica. I'm going to pull you in shortly. Thank you. So that's really interesting. So cycle time is a lagging indicator if you think about it, because the work item has to come right through the system, get to done before you clock your cycle time. So it's really important in your daily meeting. We call it the daily Kanban. It's an optional meeting. You don't have to have it. It's not really needed until you use another addendum to Kanban, the flow strategy. Really, really important every day to look at this work item aging chart. And that brings me to another point, actually, that you need to also have a thing called a service level expectation. So this is not a service level agreement. Service level expectation. So how long do we think, so if an item comes in here, how long does it take to get to here? And so we don't really have enough data based on this thing. Looking at the work item aging chart, I made a guess yesterday. You can guess at the start and you don't have enough data. 85% chance and when an item comes in here, it'll be done in 40 days or less. 40 days or less. Hopefully, as we gather more data, we can have as we get more data on our scatter plot. What we can literally do is all the dots get added to the chart. Very simple. You just draw a ruler up, and when 85% of the dots are underneath, that's your 85%, 85th percentile service level expectation. So it's nice to set an expectation to your customers that when an item gets into the board, roughly how long it's going to take. That's going to get very erratic if we're doing what we're doing at the moment, because I would put it to you that the way this system is being managed is not really good, because these items were rushed through the system. They jumped over these guys, and this guy has been left to rot since the 12th of March, and this one since the 1st of March. I'm going to take a couple of questions from people online. So I'm going to bring in Olu next. Thank you, Olu, for joining. I can see Raj Kumar, Amani, and Monica on the queue as well. So I'm going to bring you in now. I hope you've got your kit ready. Olu, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. I think it's great so far. I'm learning some things new because I'm not so familiar with Kanban. So this is something new for me and quite refreshing to see that there is another way of actually working in Agile with teams around. Yeah. So yeah, great stuff going on so far.
Good, good. And feel free to come back in later on, Olu. If you have any specific questions, you can put them on the chat window, the comments, or or any specific questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Rajkumar, you're on. How are you doing?
Hey, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Sorry, I joined a bit late, so I missed a bit in the front actually. But great. I'm not doing any kind of a Scrum or Kanban kind of thing today, but I did it in my previous organization. I'm actually looking to do that moving forward as well. So this is kind of a really kind of a ground zero for me. Sorry, that's probably a bad way to kind of explain that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's exactly what this presentation is designed for. And don't worry that you missed the start, because this the replay will be available on whichever channel you came in anyway. So
fantastic, John. I was actually reading at the scrum.org guidebook yesterday. So whatever you were talking was pretty familiar to me. It's fresh in my mind. Apart from the difference was in this one you were mentioning the I can't remember the phase 1, phase 2, or the was on the
progress
chart.
1 and progress 2.
Progress 1, progress 2. Thank you very much. Which they didn't really mention in the Scrum side of things. But yeah.
Yeah. So there's a danger when I show you. If I should put up the workflow again, just for so people are aware what we're talking about. So if I just change my camera back so we can just see what we're talking about there. So on this workflow, this is just my workflow, and there's a real danger that when I show something, oh, is this the way it's supposed to be designed? Actually, the only limit is your imagination. You can come up with much better ways of visualizing this work. And I just happen to have a particular workflow where very, very simple. For example, it could have been we do some design first, maybe some UX research and stuff like that, and then maybe it moves on to development/test. You could even have UX, dev, test, and so on. The guide that you're referring to is the Kanban guide for Scrum teams. It's really, really good. I'm a Scrum.org PST myself, and I teach that as well. And so for teams that are already using Scrum, the Kanban guide for Scrum team is a fantastic way of leveraging Scrum and the empiricism you get from Scrum, and then adding statistical analysis so that you can actually make really informed decisions and improve the flow of your system. And I did a blog post series in Scrum.org and posted about 100 experiments I did. And it was beyond reasonable doubt for me that when you add Kanban to Scrum, it was like adding rocket fuel to your Scrum. It was just, as long as you limit work in progress, as long as you're not just visualizing stuff on a wall, you know. This is more what I'm doing here today about Kanban, the flow strategy. This is more for people who aren't doing Scrum. Maybe they're not comfortable using Scrum for whatever reason. It doesn't suit what they do. One of the things about Kanban, the flow strategy, it doesn't have any roles. There's no Scrum Master, there's no product owner. It's just a team just getting their work done. And you could even have a team using this as I say this tongue in cheek. It could even be your mind your own business type system. So if a team is being overwhelmed at work from customers, it can use this system to try and improve its flow so that it has happier customers and so that it can learn faster from its customers.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're definitely looking in the right place. The Scrum.org Kanban guide for some teams, if anybody's interested. They've got a professional Scrum and Kanban class as well. There's loads of trainers offering that's really, really good. This talk today is more about what if I'm just using Kanban and I don't want to use Scrum. Yeah. And there are some teams like that. Thank you very much for joining, Rajkumar.
Pleasure is always mine.
Cheers. Thank you. Amani, you're up. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for this, and hope everyone, yourself and everyone else, is safe and healthy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. So I do work as a Scrum Master, some other roles as well, but at the moment with software team, where we do use Scrum, and I think the challenge with Scrum is the metric side of things. So even burn downs or the cumulative flow diagrams aren't really demonstrative of like a team's performance or good indicators, let's put it that way. So very much use Kanban metrics like cycle flow and some of the things you've mentioned. And I'm really looking into professional Scrum with Kanban. So as you mentioned, scrum.org. So using that as a reference a lot to sort of intertwine both to really get the most out of software teams. What really caught my eye about your talk today or your show today was the complexity. So that you've trademarked complexity and Kanplexity. So really interested to sort of like get around that and trying to sort of, see how I can enhance further and just sort of do what I do and just sort of combine and weave what I can learn today
Thank you,
to
Amani.
get the most out of software teams.
So I came up with Kanplexity last year, Kanban for complexity, Kanplexity for short. Came up with it last year because I had this team, and they just were not clued into the Scrum way of thinking. They didn't want to have a Scrum master. It was like they were like passing around a hop. I'm a Scrum trainer. I love Scrum. So don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing Scrum, but. So if they wanted to do Scrum, I would have helped them, of course. But it was kind of obvious to me that because I was only helping them maybe 1-2 hours a day, sometimes only 3-4 days a week. And so what I didn't want to do was turn my back and then they just do something else. So I said, oh, crap. These guys, they really love Kanban, but they're doing complex work. Oh, screw it. What am I going to do? And I said, well, I could be here and I can help them. But what about when I leave? They need some reference, so that when I'm gone, they know what to do and that kind of thing. So literally, January last year, I wrote it because of a team I was struggling with, and it was brilliant. They were 10 times better than any other team in that building, and they'd really engaged stakeholders. It was really, really cool. And you'll know the other viewers as well. They'll notice later on that it looks very like Scrum.
It's really interesting. So you really got creative in time of need.
I did. And the other problem that I had as well, Amani, is that the cycle time for that team was over 100 days. So I was thinking, hang on a second, how am I going to do Scrum here? I mean, you're supposed to deliver an increment in 30 days, right? Let's say 4 weeks in practice. So am I going to have work carrying over like 4 sprints in a row? And what if they change their mind about what they want? It's just going to be a mess, right? So okay, what will we do? And it was really interesting because even though their cycle time started at, I think it was 119 days, by the time I finished with them 3-4 months later, their cycle time was down to 16 days.
No way.
Yeah, and that was 85th percentile. It wasn't just average. It was really good. And that team taught me a lot, actually. They I learn often when I'm doing training, I learn more from the people who are there than I actually teach people. And I learned from the team that's a lady had an idea. She said they didn't want to put the Kanban board on the wall because it was too confidential what they were doing. And it was confidential.
Fair enough.
So I said, okay. And then there were some electronic tools that the company were using, and it wasn't really that, it was kind of sucked as a tool, in my opinion, for Kanban anyway. So I gave them a spreadsheet that I used, which I'll show you tomorrow if you want to join again tomorrow. If you can't make it, there'll be a recording. And so anyway, this lady, she said, I know what we'll do. We'll record waiting time. I said, what do you mean you're going to record waiting time? She says, yeah, when something is blocked, I'm going to record it. Yeah, I'll share the blog, Flavia. Thank you. And so what do you mean? I said, you mean when you go to the toilet, you're going to record waiting? No. She said, they did meet every day. So they said, if it's still blocked tomorrow, we mark it as waiting time. And so it was really interesting because when the executives came in to say, we want you to do more work, they said, well, the last time you did that, look what happened to the waiting time. It was like in yellow, like the bars in the graph were like going, you know what I mean? It was fantastic. All we did was squeeze out the waiting time.
Yeah, especially if the blockers are outside of the team's hands or the Scrum Master's hand, and it's the stakeholders of the business, then they can actually, visually see. Yeah, that's true. No, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So keep your powder dry. We'll have a look at it later on. But what else intrigues you today, Amani?
Oh, plenty of stuff. Really, it's around the metrics. And for me, it's professional Scrum with Kanban. Really, really believe that Scrum alone can't really help the team, especially with, trying to get product increments out and things like that. And I think a lot of teams struggle with that. A lot of software teams struggle with that. And I think it's the environment and possibly, I know this is sort of just throwing out words now, but it's the psychological safety and the environment, the culture, perhaps sometimes a turnover of teams. Those are, I guess, challenges that we frequent, but also the definition of done, So, when an item is picked up, a PBR, for example, and you go through, the workflow, a lot of teams, when they establish DoD, they still sort of, what is done. And sometimes the context of how the teams are set up and what they're delivering matters as well. But I think a lot of teams struggle, teams that I've worked with, and, we have overcome challenges, but I think that's always a common issue that I've found, or challenges, not issues, challenges, to try and help them with. So it's the metrics, every kind of metric that I can look into to try and elevate.
So just on that, right, I'm going to switch camera and I'm going to address what you just said at the flip chart, because there's a common kind of misperception about that. So I want to just help you and other people who are watching as well. So on this very simple workflow here, Amani, we've got backlog selected, in progress 1, in progress 2, and done. And in a very simple Scrum situation, this could mean sprint backlog. Selected could mean that's when we made a commitment to the customer. We're supposed to have a cross-functional team in Scrum, so there's really no kind of concept of, development test. But what happens sometimes is good. Sometimes you're not visualizing the workers, you're visualizing the work. So you might have some work that's in development and some work that's in test. And there might even be developers doing this testing and vice versa and so on. And so what you do is you're kind of visualizing where the problems are. So if, for example, this item is actually blocked here, and now we're getting all sorts of extra items going in here as well, in on top of the in progress 1 column. You can kind of see, and you can see they're breaching their work in progress limits now, because they've got a limit of 1 here and they've got a limit of 2 here. I find, by the way, that most people ignore those numbers, and this is why I use painter's tape or just marker, so you can see that actually I should have been kind of holding back there, because if I want to bring this item in, there's no slot for it. So I find that works better. But from a Scrum Kanban Guide for Scrum Teams point of view, what you could do is you could measure the cycle time from here to here. Or you could. What I tend to do is I go from here to here. I also go from here to here. So what actual work time were they doing? You can even have a cycle time for just one column, but more importantly, probably selected to getting the customer feedback, because we might be getting stuff done very quickly, but maybe there's a few stages after our team where it doesn't get released for whatever reason. There's some big, there's synchronized releases and some big bank you're working for, or
like release trains, or
that kind of thing. So there could almost be another workflow beyond this. Of all those steps. So if we deliver really, really fast here, it doesn't really matter, because it's not getting to the customer faster. And
feedback, yes.
Yeah, so the trick with Professional Scrum with Kanban is you're not just looking at your sprint backlog. You might even be breaking down the backlog into the various levels of granularities. You're breaking down your backlog before it comes in. If there's some UX stuff happening, I don't know, before stuff comes in. You could visualize all that on the Kanban. So you could also have cycle time for UX, inbound, cycle time for in-dev tests, overall cycle time. You could have a number of different cycle times going on. And also, you could have another cycle time from here to getting to, again, feedback from the customer. And that way, you will spot where your blockage is in delivering value. It would be a mistake just to use Kanban just for the sprint backlog, in my opinion. I would also use it for upstream of the sprint and downstream of the sprint. In the perfect world, your done increment in Scrum will be potentially releasable. So as soon as it gets to the end of the sprint, you release it. If you're not in that world yet, it is useful to have your workflow extending downstream, so you can see where the blockages are. You might be delivering this really quickly. Your cycle time here, maybe we're happy with 40 days, but maybe the overall cycle time is 180 days. So it doesn't matter how fast we are here if we're not reducing it over on the right-hand side of the workflow as well. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, no, it does. So just on that, John, just to sort of like hone in on that a little bit. So cycle time as a metric, who is it really valuable for? So is it for the team's purpose? Is it for the PO, for the product owner? And I know you've said you can measure it from column 2 to 4, or from the backlog to when we get the customer feedback, and it loops back again. So predominantly, is it stakeholders? Is it product owner? Is it whose purpose? Or is it, again, context-based?
So this is really interesting, right? From a Scrum and Kanban point of view, Kanban guide for Scrum teams, everybody's interested in Scrum.org, anybody who's watching. You can, if the workflow is just about the sprint backlog, the development team owns that. So they'll own their own metrics in terms of their own cycle time, there's cumulative flow diagram, all that kind of cool stuff. If the workflow goes beyond the sprint backlog, either upstream or downstream, then the entire Scrum team owns those metrics, including the product owner. And it could be, what we do though in this particular method, this is Kanban the flow strategy, or what I do here is I tend to have policies where you write down on a post-it, Amani is in charge of the CFD diagrams, and she's also working with Monica, who's on the queue as well, and Flavia, who's giving us some comments. So the three of you together are worried about these charts, and you're making it really specific. So really what you could do is you come up with a kind of a team agreement about who's worried about the metrics and the charts for within the sprint. Who is there someone in the development team, or are we all worried about it together? I worry that if everybody is responsible, nobody's responsible. So it's nice to just write down who's worried about this the most. So the one or two people are going to kind of keep an eye on this. Who's worried about the upstream? That might be the product owner might be worried more about the upstream, right? Because they've got customers maybe demanding lots of changes and so on. And then downstream, I would imagine the product owner is also interested in downstream because that value that came into the backlog, they don't get the customers off their back until it gets released to the customer and they get some feedback. So I would imagine that the product owner is more concerned about the entire value stream, cycle time metrics, and so on. And the development team in Scrum would be worried about their sprint backlog metrics. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we can come back to that again later. Amani, you're not restricted to coming on once, so we can have another chat again later on. Any other questions that you have for now?
No, thank you. I want to take.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Please come back on again later on when we talk about Kanban for complexity.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Monica, you're up.
Hi.
Hi, Monica.
Hi. Yeah. It's more for me a refresh and update, a refresh for Kanban and Scrum. I worked a few years ago with some project and small teams with Scrum, and we added also Kanban. It was nice and keep us focused to finish the work. And now I'm freelancer and trying to focus my work and get it done. And I think it will help me to refresh and find some metric as well to know, to predict the work.
So you really love Monica. You should really you probably love me showing. I might do another live stream on Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting, and I was working with a team in Vienna this morning on something like that, where they were trying to get something done by the end of the year, and they discovered that maybe it wasn't so achievable. And I'm very, very happy to show that as well. But what we do in this guide for Kanban the flow strategy, we could have come up with all sorts of metrics all over the place, but we came up with what are the minimum measures that we think you need. In the addendum then, Monica, you will see additional ones that you can add as well, like flow efficiency is quite a popular measure as well, as in the percentage of actual work time out of your entire cycle time. So if your work is, you're only spending 2 days on something, but it takes 10 days, it might be just like 20% flow efficiency. So the guide, Kanban, the flow strategy, the reason that we came up with it is because we wanted to keep Kanban really, really simple. just bring it right back to basics.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
It's nice, it's clear, yeah. And
yeah. And the other thing we did as well was, because we're aware that not everybody wants something simple. So in the first addendum, there's all sorts of complications you can add about scaling. How do we deal with multiple teams? What do I measure? How do I measure? What does done even mean in a Kanban context? Because Mike Burrows has a different view about definition of done. He's kind of famous for saying that done is when the customer's need is met. So you might use that as your definition of done instead of what would typically be done in the Scrum context. So it kind of depends on what you want. And as Amani was mentioning earlier as well, there's also a complexity addendum as well. So we deliberately kept complexity out to keep it simple, forgive the pun. But in the event that you had people who were in a complex situation where there was more unknown than known, we wanted there to be a very clear version of Kanban so that you could still use Kanban in the complex space.
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
You're welcome. So if you want to come back in, I'll leave you here for now. I'll just put you on hiding. But you can just ping a message as well on the whichever channel you came on, and I will see your message and I'll know that you want to come back online. Same goes for Amani as well, and Raj Kumar if you want to come back on. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, Flavia, I'll just put a short URL in the message window so that you can see it's just the one that I remember off the top of my head. It's bit.ly / John Coleman blog. That will give you all my blogs on Scrum.org, and I think they were my first blogs, the first 3 blogs in Scrum.org. So if you look at that, Flavia, you should be okay. So I've just dropped that onto the channel. So let me know if you want to hear more about that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the flip chart now and just go through more content, and I'll check in on your comments if you've got any more that you want to say, or if you want to just join the stream. Be delighted to have you, and thank you very much for coming. So I'm going to switch over now to the flip chart again. Okay, and we should be back in action. Okay, so just a reminder, Kanban is about Kanban, the flow strategy rather, is a strategy for delivering value faster, learning faster. Here's the workflow concept is a very important concept in the Kanban guide for Scrum teams at Scrum.org, and it's also central to Kanban, the flow strategy. If you get the workflow right, this is just one example of a workflow. You could use other workflows. There's other types of visualization. Just going to show you one other example. Each of these work items, you could actually have a Kanban on a Kanban. How about that? Because what I see a lot of the time is I see, particularly in sprint backlogs, what I see is they have the product backlog items at the start, and then they break it down into tasks as they go across. And okay, you can see them as you go across. But this is just an alternative way of doing this, because what you do is the card for the work item has a start date and end date. It is mandatory in Kanban, the flow strategy, to have a start date and end date. And I like using a date stamp. Thank you to Alex Matthews for that suggestion. And a little date stamp, something satisfying about stamping the start, stamping the end. And the difference isn't the cycle time, is you add +1 as well. So calendar day difference +1. But here you can see 3, it's like a Kanban board within this work item on this Kanban board. So you have like a not started column, in progress, and done. So I know that this item isn't done until all those tasks have moved into done, and then it goes to done. So that's just, the only limit is your imagination. So please do not be stuck by my really horrible, simple workflow in this situation. Here's another example as well, where what you can do on the work item is, as well as having the start date and the end date, if there's a definition of done, if, for example, you're using Scrum or something like that, what you could do is you could have a tick box for each line item in your definition of done, and when those are done, maybe it moves to done, as well as the acceptance criteria as well. Of course, I'm oversimplifying that. So the only limit is your imagination. Other policies you'll notice here as well is there's a kind of policy here. So how do I go from here to here? How do I decide which item gets active first? How do I decide whether this item is ready to go into the next stage? How do I know that this is ready to go into the next stage as well? And of course, there's the danger with pushing an item into the next stage. So behavior. I love what Brendan Bochco said. He's a famous trainer in the US from Huge.io, and he says he was on stage in Indianapolis last year in Agile India. Maybe it was 2018, and maybe my memory is failing me. Might have been 2018. And he said, I have this item. Who's ready to take it away from me? And that's a real pull system, because instead of like pushing the item into the, I'm actually pushing in. Actually, I'm saying, okay, who's ready to take this away? Oh, this person's right. Okay, they'll take it over and they'll bring it across. So just because we've got limited work in progress doesn't mean that it's still not possible if you have to push within your system. And that is just an example I just showed you there, where if you just push an item in, there's still an element of push in what you're doing, even though overall you're trying to create a pull system. Just keeping an eye on the comments there. I don't see any new comments coming in. Keep them coming in, and I'll be more than happy to help you. So that's the concept of workflow. And you could have as many cycle times as you want. You can have as many start and end points as you want, even just one column on the actual workflow itself. So I need to talk now about the practices of Kanban, the flow strategy. So very simple practices. First of all, you define and visualize your workflow. The one I had kind of sucked. You would come up with your own. And usually what I do with a team when we try to define and visualize our workflow, I show them something so they know what a workflow might kind of look like. But then I say, I think, just like I just told you now, I think my workflow sucks. Can you come up with a better one? And they always come up with a better one. And so if there's a group of 10 people, they might go into pairs, and so you might get 5 different kind of designs coming back. And usually what ends up happening is we end up merging all those ideas, and we end up coming up with a fantastic way of visualizing the work in our system. You need to actively manage work in progress. I'm going to talk more about that later on. And you need to review and improve the definition of workflow. So this is where the empiricism comes in. So it's all very well to define your workflow, but is that it? I mean, you're stuck with that workflow forever? No, you probably need to be changing it very regularly. And you learn when we talk about complexity that you might even need to change it every day. So this is something that we're constantly looking at, usually on a kind of some kind of regular cycle, but it doesn't have to be a regular cycle. But you do need to be looking at that every now and again to see, are there options to improve your workflow. Just to remind you here that there are definitions at the back of the guide. So if you go to kanbanguides.org, and if you look at the back of the guide, you'll see there are definitions. There's even definitions for value. How about that? So we're not assuming even what value is. And one of the things we did is we added in societal value, because I had a chat with my 16-year-old daughter last year. She was 15 last year, the holidays with her. And she kind of gave me a guilt trip. She said, Dad, if you do your job well, does that mean you're going to make the planet worse? And I kind of gulped a bit. So as well as customer and end user value and knowledge value, we also have a societal value. So are we helping the planet pass on plastic or whatever kind of topic you might want to look at? So lots of definitions. What is a work item? What is cycle time? What are the what's a backlog even? What's a funnel? There's an optional concept of funnel, like a backlog for the backlog. In Scrum, there is no funnel; it's just a backlog. But in Kanban, you kind of have a funnel before your backlog. So these are the practices. Really, really simple. We could have had lots more. Limiting work in progress, optimizing work in progress is kind of captured within here anyway, because you're going to actively manage your work in progress. By definition, you need some kind of explicit way of limiting your work in progress. Okay, I don't see any questions on that one. So just drilling into actively managing work in progress, that means you limit the work in progress appropriately. Now, there is a situation where if you limit work in progress, that you make things worse. One of them is you just make the number too low. You have 9 developers and you've got 1 item. I mean, maybe that works, but that sounds like a really low work in progress limit for me. But you could have a situation where maybe there's a number of different suppliers working in this company, and for whatever reason, the client designed these really bad contracts where everybody's just responsible for their own thing. So actually the suppliers won't cooperate. So if you have a situation where there is a disincentive to cooperate, you have to be really, really careful about limiting work in progress, because you could actually starve the system. There needs to be a willingness to collaborate. And usually when you put work in progress limits, when you can see on the workflow that a particular column has problems, people might protest or say, okay, I'm going to go over and help testing or development or whatever, and then they go back to their normal work and I won't do it again kind of thing. But actually we've kind of won, because they've done something they wouldn't normally have done. They got a signal that that particular work is in trouble, and so they try to focus on that. So when we optimize work in progress, we're essentially limiting the work in progress. What I find is a sweet spot. You might find this surprising. It's 2/3 of the capacity of the team. I know I hear rules of thumb of between 1 and 2. In my experience, I find if it's actually less than the number of people on the team, and then people say, what do you mean? We've 9 developers, you've got 6 work items in progress limit. We have people doing no work. And I said, well, let's see then. Let's see if we have no work. And so what happens is you're really, I won't say forcing is too strong a word, but you're really encouraging collaboration and people caring about getting that entire item finished. This is why I like this Kanban and a Kanban idea, because this isn't done until all these are done. So I really, really like that. That's a reference to Brendan Bochco's quotation. And so there's a real increase in focus, commitment, and collaboration when you optimize work in progress. If you're not optimizing work in progress, you are not doing Kanban. You're just doing visual management. We don't even call it something in Kanban. It's just visual management. And visual management has value. It just doesn't help you to improve your flow. To actively manage your WIP, though, it's not just about optimizing work in progress. You also need to respond very quickly to blockages. So if there's an item that's blocked, but also if there's something getting old, you might remember that item back in our workflow back here. Let me just bring it back here. We had 2 items that were getting really old. This one started on the 1st of March, and this one started on the 12th of March. Today's the 9th of April, day of this recording. So we haven't been actively managing work in progress here. And on top of that, this one's blocked. So this doesn't look very healthy. I hope this team has some chat to review the workflow to improve how they're working, because they seem to be kind of, at least they're respecting their work in progress limits, but they thought that they've won by doing that, but actually they haven't, because we know from our aged item chart, and we also know from the cycle time chart that this team isn't really performing that predictably at the moment. I'm not saying we have to be predictable, but we do try to improve the predictability of our work. I understand that when we're not in the clear domain, obvious, clear, simple domain from a Kanban point of view, that work isn't predictable as such. But we're trying to improve our predictability in whatever way we can, at least trying to make it less erratic. So you need to watch the aged work, but also watch the blocked work. So I don't know about you, but when work is blocked, what do we usually do? We usually start a new item, right? That's why items take longer and longer and longer. So please, when something's blocked, unblock it. When something's aging, try to move it. I heard a guy in a large bank a few years ago, and I loved what he did. He had this policy, a move policy or a pull policy. He said, okay, we prioritize by value, which I didn't agree with, because for me it's about the older the item, that's the one you move, because you don't know how valuable it is until you actually get to feedback. But he said, if any item is more than 4 days old, we're just going to move it regardless. I thought that was genius, because basically what he was doing was, you're trying to prioritize by value, but if it got over 4 days old, he knew that was a signal that we're going to get in trouble. So really, really smart. Really appreciate that he came up with that comment. But like I said, I learn more from people I work with than I offer other people. Okay, so there are 3 more aspects to this. You also need to balance the flow. So when an item goes into done, that now creates a space in progress. So that means that you can bring an item in from selected. That creates a slot here where you can potentially bring an item in from the product backlog. Although in this case, it might not be a very smart decision to bring an item in from the product backlog, because you've got 3 items here and there's 1 item here. Not sure how good the flow is. I don't have enough context on this diagram. You need to be very careful. We assume that when something gets done, we should bring something in, but if there's a little bit of, if the toilet is blocked, so to speak, and it's not really blocked here, but if it was, then you don't necessarily bring a new item in from the product backlog. You might want to just drain the swamp a little bit, just kind of get through whatever items you have, get them through, and then you can start bringing items through again. Sometimes there's an advanced topic. Sometimes you might have a constraint in your system. For those of you who are into theory of constraints, in the basic guide, we do refer to if you have a situation where you have a ridiculously expensive constraint. In other words, as a part of your workflow that is the slowest part of your, it's not really here, but let's say if I go back to my workflow here, and let's just dream this up. Let's say this is the slowest part of our whole system. The cycle time for this column is always much longer than all the other ones, which is kind of a signal that it might be the constraint. So what you do is there's an advanced technique from TameFlow where they deal with that. That is supported by the guide. So we're very specific. We're not saying always when you get something done, you always bring something in. If that's my constraint, you might also want to make sure that work gets through the constraint as well as going through the end before you bring a new item into the system. I might talk about that in more detail with the TameFlow guys on another day. Steve Tendon and Daniel Dairon are the experts on that. So yeah, so assuming you don't have a constraint, normally one item comes out, another item comes in, unless there's some kind of blockage in your system. You also need to watch the work items in your system against the service level expectation. So if our service expectation is 40 days, and we've got some items that are already 35 days, well, we probably need to give them special attention because the customer is going to be disappointed with those items if we don't deliver them sooner, or we won't get feedback about whether they're delivering the right value. And I've mentioned this already on blocking work. And actually, in hindsight, if I was to do another update to this guide, which we probably will do this year, maybe this should be number one. Maybe unblocking work should be number one. Okay, so I'm just going to check in with Rajkumar, Amani, and Monica. Do you have any questions on what I've done so far before I do more content? Rajkumar, any questions so far?
No, John, not really a question. There was something that you were telling earlier that I just wanted to clarify. I think the volume just broke down a bit.
Okay.
Where you did mention that when you were working with a team, if it's gone untouched for 4 days, then I can't remember what I didn't hear what you actually said. Remove it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words,
is there kind of a process to remove it, or you just remove it because?
No, I don't mean remove it. Just move it, as in like we should work on that item today.
Oh, right. I understood. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you I'm glad you mentioned that now because that would have been a big misunderstanding if we. I would have put you off big time with that. So. Maybe the audio kicked out at the wrong time. You probably thought I said remove. Yeah. No. So when I say move, it means I'm moving an item. Items in a Kanban board generally move from left to right. A card generally doesn't move backwards. I had some people telling me yesterday. Just go back to the board here and go back to the workflow chart, and they were saying they were really struggling with this. They said, let's imagine this is test and this is development, right? So they said, well, this is blocked, so we should move this back to development, right? I said, no, it's blocked here in test. Yeah, we might need developers to help us to fix the bug or whatever it is, but you leave it here because an item always moves from left. No, I won't say always, but generally left to right, doesn't move right to left. There'd be only kind of two situations that I can think of, Rajkumar, where you might move an item left. One of them would be, see here, there's exit criteria to get out of in progress one.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the definition of done for development kind of thing. So if we had moved this item in and we shouldn't have, it didn't actually meet those criteria, yeah, that'd be a good reason to move it back.
Yeah.
Or you should never have started in the first place, in which case you remove it. But even in that case, what I would do is I would move it to done and I would mark it as cancelled because the cycle times just get messed up. If you've got items going back onto the backlog, it messes up all your metrics.
Right.
And you're actually hiding a problem as well. I had a team yesterday morning like that. They were hiding a problem. If something was difficult, like, let's just move it back to the backlog. No, leave it there. It's blocked. We need to solve it. If you move it out of the way, you're just hiding the problem. We can't see the problem anymore. Yeah. So the word Kanban means visual signal. So it's kind of we want to get a signal that there's a problem.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
One other question, not so much on Kanban or Scrum, but Is there a concept of roadmap when you're actually doing Kanban or Scrum? In your experience, is there a concept of having a roadmap, like a product roadmap, when you're doing Scrum and Kanban? Because the reason why I ask that is you're putting everything in the backlog, and you're choosing, depending on being agile and being responsive to the market and your customers, you're choosing the right work items to be delivered in a very agile form. So again, I might be wrong, but sometimes the concept of roadmap where you try and put, a 12 months roadmap or something like that, it kind of counteracts to the Kanban workflow and the Scrum kind of methodology.
Absolutely,
but I don't know, from your experience, have you seen product team having a roadmap and also doing things in an agile form where things could change in a monthly basis?
Honest answer, no. But what I do is I give them a better way of dealing with the problem. And Matthew Ijigi as well just noticed as well that he also thought I said remove it. So did I have a Freudian slip? I don't know, Matthew. I'm not sure. But thank you. I'm glad, Rajkumar, you caught that. But there's a better way. So what I do, I did this only this morning. So let's say you mentioned Scrum teams, right? So you have a Scrum team, and in Scrum, you've got a sprint goal. Okay, so the Scrum team commits to commits to the sprint goal. Usually the development team really committing to the sprint goal as part of the overall agreement as part of the Scrum team, and so that's fine, and they aim to do the sprint goal. But a commitment in Scrum is not a guarantee. It means we're going to do our best. We are going to damn well do our best. So it's not like a loose commitment. We're not making a promise though. We're really going to try. Yeah, we're really going to try. And it has to be doing our best, because if the team discovers during the sprint that actually, I thought it was 2 days. Oh crap, it's 2 months. Then the worst thing they could do is try to get that done within the 2-week sprint, and then they'll probably deliver some really bad technical debt. Yes, Matthew. I remember you from Liberty Global. How are you doing? So this is the real problem, right? Because you're not committing what you're going. Well, you are, but you're going to do your best. So we can't guarantee we'll deliver the work this sprint, right? So that means we're less sure we can deliver work in the next sprint. I sure have no clue what's going to happen in sprint 6 or sprint 13 or sprint 15. And I often see these roadmaps where I kind of laugh when I see them, because we know exactly what we're doing in sprint 17, right? I don't even know what I'm doing this sprint. I'm exaggerating, but so what we do,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but there is so I don't want to leave that as a problem though, because from a Canadian point of view, with complex work, you need to embrace uncertainty and all that kind of cool stuff, and new ideas are usually better than the old ideas, and there's all sorts of reasons why we can't tell what we're going to be doing in sprint 14, sprint 15, sprint 16. However, on a stream next week, I'll be talking about Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting. And what's really, really interesting is, statistically, we can ask questions like, how big is our backlog right now? Okay, how small could it get? It doesn't usually get smaller, right? But it might get smaller.
Yeah.
I had a team this morning, it was like between 25 and 300 items. Because what I did, I said, give me a range, don't give me a number, give me a range that is 90%, you're 90% sure it's going to be true. There's only a 10% chance you're going to be wrong. So if you put down $1,000 in the morning, so when I asked them that question, they said, first of all, it'll be 25 to 100, I think. And then when I said, no, 90%, I said, if you're not confident, you need to widen the range. And we ended up narrowing it down to 66 to 200 items or something like that, I think later on when we did that. So that was really interesting. So how big is our backlog? It might be this small, might be this big. And then I said, well, how complicated are each item? So for each of those items in the backlog, how likely is it that when you lift the bonnet, it's like so complicated you have to create a new item? And so they said 1 in 5. So I said, okay, multiply 1.2. Thank you. And then I said, how many items do you deliver in a sprint? And give me a good sprint and give me a bad sprint. Give me a really bad sprint, give me a really good sprint. 90% chance you're right, 10% chance you're wrong. And they came up with a range, I can't remember, 3 to 24 items a month. And you put that in. You could use straight maths if you want to just do the averages. But if you plan an average, you'll fail on average. So what this does, I love Troy McGinnis's tools. He's the most generous man on the internet. His website is focusedobjective.com. I'll add that in a second when I stop talking. And he's got some free stuff there. And I use his tools, and I use Daniel Vicanti's tools as well. And what's really cool about it is instead of like going with the 50% date, which is like, think about it, it's like toss a coin, heads or tails. I don't think we want a 50% plan, right?
Yeah.
We kind of want more 85, 90%, and this was a legal regulatory thing, so closer to 95. And so what it does is it rolls the dice a few hundred times, or depending on the tool, hundreds of thousands of times, or even a million times. And it says, okay, it does a histogram. So if you pick the middle, that's the 50% date. If you go over to the right of it, right for you is the other way, then you can get the 85th, 90th, 95th percentile. And so what you can say is 85% chance we'll deliver by this date, but I don't have enough data. I need to run this 11 times before I'm confident. But if you have loads of data from Jira, or whatever tool you're using, I can put that in, and then we'll be more confident. But you can use a technique called Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting. And I'll do a live stream on that next week, Raj Kumar, and that's a much better way. Because really, if you think about it, all people want to know, they just want to know, when will it be done?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they might want you to do a roadmap, but actually all they want, when will it be done? And so they're just showing you what way they understand. But when you do it that way, you're compromising Scrum or Kanban in this case, what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Cool.
Makes sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I hope you can get to see that next week, or maybe join us, or watch a replay of something like that. Thank you, Raj Kumar. I'll move on to Amani, see if she's got any questions. Thank you.
Hi.
Amani, any more questions?
Yeah, I just so really interesting. You mentioned the Monte Carlo simulation.
Yeah.
And so I'd be interested to attend that as well. Look forward to that. But also, how it accounts for complexity of items. You know, when you've got epics and so on and so forth. Just hurling back to a little bit of a Scrum. I know you probably don't want to sort of focus too much on that, but that'd be interesting to catch next week.
Yeah.
But I think based on what you just went through right now, I think I posted a question. I just wanted to sort of like work out, how would you go on? So if you're working with a new team, let's say, how would you go about defining the WIP with them? Say if it's a size of, say, 7 developers.
Yeah. So I don't see your comment, but I'll just answer you. First of all, it's a guess. You're going to come up with a number. I go with rule of thumb. If there were 9 developers, I go with 6. It depends on the situation. If it's a very creative team, if there's a lot of UX type stuff going on, it might be a higher WIP limit, because creative people tend to be able to multitask more. They tend to kind of get off more on that. But if it's more engineering type people, where they need a bit more focus, they tend to have for me, my WIP limit is 1. I'm completely useless. When people come to me, I'm sorry guys, I'm focusing on this thing. I won't even talk to you until I finish this item. I'm kind of annoying that way. It's really, you just start with a guess, and then what you do though is you use the charts to inform you. So you look at the charts, and then you'll see some charts tomorrow on the live stream tomorrow that I'm doing when I'm playing advanced feature band, and we'll actually be running retrospectives, and we'll look at our charts. We say, oh, holy crap, okay, what change do we need to make to kind of deal with this situation? Because we can see our cycle times are going up, and we don't have to be a genius. If your cycle times are going up, eventually your throughput is going to go down, isn't it? So we're going to use all sorts of charts tomorrow. We got charts coming up to Kazoo tomorrow. There was something else that you prompted me on, but I'm getting senile, so I forgot. So maybe you have to remind me if there's something else you wanted me to say.
I wanted to touch base on tooling. I know there are many tools out there, but just sort of in your experience, let's say slightly complex software products. What have you sort of come across that really works well? Jira, I'm a huge fan of Jira, but I just don't. Jira does do a good job with sort of Scrum. It's great. I think combining Scrum and Kanban, it doesn't clearly do WIPs, I think, and some of the other things and some of the other metrics as well. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I probably get shot now for saying this. I love spreadsheets because you can do your own charts. But if you had to pick a tool, I use Kanbanize. I love Kanbanize. Also, Swift Kanban is very good. I think Swift Kanban has two-way sync with Jira, actually. So you can
Okay.
get best of both worlds. They used to have
It's
anyway.
like
back in,
plugins.
yeah, so, and Daniel Vacanti's software is fantastic. So if you're using Jira, get actionable
Yes.
agile, and you'll have charts coming out your backside. Sorry for using bad language. You'll have loads of charts. And it's brilliant. Daniel's software is brilliant.
Yeah, Daniel's like he's the whole professional Scrum and Kanban, right? He's
Yeah, and he's got his own thing going on as well with Kanban as well. He actually wrote this guide with me as well.
okay. Yeah. And I was just talking about the whip. Some teams may be ambitious and they underdeliver. The whole thing with the the sprint goal, we'll do our best. Again, that's like another challenge. But then they sort of underdeliver for whatever reasons, however long the sprint is. Things happen, sure. But it's just I guess as a Scrum Master, combining both methods, would you kind of try and push them to be slightly ambitious, or take their word and then inspect and adapt, and then work through that through the retrospective?
I tend to do it. Yeah, I tend to do it. I use retrospective because if you change the whip limits too often, in systems thinking they call it tinkering. You're just messing around. So it takes a few days before the change in your whip limit will have an impact on the charts. And if you change them too often, you won't know which change you made a difference. So in practice, I tend to not go near them for 2 weeks, maybe 6 days to 2 weeks. I wouldn't be changing them every day. You can do it every day. Well, not every day, but you could do it. You could do an ad hoc change, but it tends to be better if you do retrospectives. It's better to kind of do it then, because then you're stepping back, you're reflecting. You're thinking about what's going on at a helicopter level. You're looking at the charts, because you get stuck in the noise every day, don't you? So you kind of lift out of it and just look at the charts, and the data will do the talking, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're combining this with Scrum, then and however long your sprint duration is, then just kind of lock it down for that duration, and then retrospect, and then
exactly.
figure out what you can do in the next
exactly.
cycle.
So in the Kanban guide for Scrum teams, they refer to flow-based retrospectives. So what happens is, because you're adding Kanban to your Scrum with the Kanban guide for Scrum teams, you now have more data available to you to make decisions. So in the sprint review, you can use Monte Carlo, for example, instead of using the burn up, burn down chart. Because the burn down chart,
no,
a bit dubious for me. I've been burnt a few times with that.
I'm not a huge fan. It's not really truly indicative. And what are your thoughts on velocity? I'd love to hear that.
I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan. It's not part of Scrum anyway, but it tends to be a recommended practice. If teams are already doing it, they tend not to believe me that counting the number of items delivered to done is better than using story points. They don't believe me, because they say, but some items are bigger than others and all this kind of, okay, whatever. I was like, but what they don't realize is that more than 90% of how long something takes is waiting time. So I don't know about you, but when you ask someone how long would something take? It'll take me 10 minutes, but it'll be waiting for 3 weeks. So it's going to be 3 weeks and 10 minutes. They don't say that. They say 10 minutes, right?
For sure.
Although there was one guy working in a client in a utility company in the UK years ago, and he said to me, John, that'll take 10 minutes, but I'm going to say 2 days because things are so crap around here. It's a genius comment. So with story point, so it's when you've got lots of dependencies between your teams, using the number of items tends to be a better predictor than story points. But my suggestion is you do both, and let the team look at the data, and they will realize themselves that it gives the same answer, or maybe you actually get a better answer from the number of items. And the reason I love a number of items as well is, if someone comes into my office right now and says, there's a drive-by note, here's another 50 items, right? I can't prove I can't deliver them. I have no evidence to say, maybe I can deliver them. You know what I mean? but I don't have any data. But if I use a number of items and I say, well, the last sprint I did 6, and then I did 4, then I did 5, then I did 7, then I did 10, whatever. And now you're giving me 50. Yeah, no chance, buddy. It's just not going to happen. And 25% chance to be done by Christmas. You happy with those odds? You like it? Is your bonus attached to this? Don't make that phone call. You probably shouldn't. Maybe we need to simplify this before you make any phone calls. Yeah. So there's all sorts of reasons why I prefer counting the number of items. And what I suggest you do, Amani, is just try it. Don't even tell the team at the start. Oh, I shouldn't be saying that. We should be transparent, right? But just keep records on the side, and then after a few sprints, just show it to them and say, by the way, guys and gals, have a look at this. Oh, that's interesting. And that explains actually why sometimes an extra large item lands at the same time as a small item. Troy McGuinness has lovely charts on that. If you go to his blog, he's got a wonderful email list as well. And if you look at it, there is a light correlation between story point and how long things take, but the range is so big that actually a 1-pointer could take as long as an 8-pointer, depending on how many dependencies you have. It's really interesting.
So you're suggesting story points and cycle time. Is that it?
No, I'm suggesting you count the number of items delivered to done every sprint.
Oh, right. Number of items done. Okay.
Yeah.
And
you could also
points.
measure cycle time, as of course. And throughput is the most important metric. Are we delivering value, right?
Yeah.
So Little's law is interesting. Just to bring up the flip chart, just to remind people about that, okay? And I'll come back to Monica in a second as well. See, Monica, if you've got any more questions as well. So I just want to go to a different page. I just want to go to the back page, actually, here. And so there are various ways of writing Little's law. It was actually originally written in terms of arrivals, and then we changed it because we do delivery, we don't do arrivals, right? And there's different formats, but I tend to write it this way. Average cycle time is equal to average work in progress divided by average throughput. Now, this is not a pure mathematical formula. There's all sorts of assumptions that underpin this. Fantastic video on Vimeo by Daniel Vicanti called Little's Flaw, because people use Little's law and they think if they use this, that they're going to improve their flow, but there's all sorts of assumptions like aging of work that we talked about earlier. So if you want to reduce your cycle time, what most people do is they increase their throughput, don't they? They add more developers. But we know that comes with a tax. There's like communication channels. Maybe there's limits to growth in our company as well. Maybe adding people doesn't actually help. And it costs money, right? It costs a lot of money. That's what most people do. And banks in particular tend to pull that lever because they've got loads of money and they'll just, let's just get more people. Let's scale our way out of this problem. But there's another way that's free, and you just reduce your work in progress. A lot of people get freaked out about that. What do you mean? What do you mean? We got like hundreds of things to do. You want us to work at 60 items at a time for 9 developers? We're going to have 3 developers idle? Are you serious? Yeah, I said I'm serious, because actually what happens is if you do this, then your cycle time will come down. If your cycle time comes down, eventually your throughput will go up. Does that make sense? So work in progress is a leading indicator of cycle time, which is an indirectly the indicator of throughput, if that makes sense. So by loading up your system with loads of work, indirectly, you're making everything take longer. I'm oversimplifying, but does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right. So any other questions?
And the whole concept of swarming is very much encouraged, right?
Absolutely. And love things like mob programming. Yeah, mob programming I love. Woody Zuhl's mob programming. And when I'm talking to UX people, I talk about mob UX. So we all get together to do the UX together, mob testing or mob whatever you're doing. Yeah. So the whole team working at one computer and working together, the complexity of thinking just goes through the roof. We get more stuff done.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
no, I would definitely find that. Just one last, sorry. When you're talking about the Monte Carlo probabilistic simulation, you mentioned someone's reference tooling around tooling. I didn't quite catch the name of that person.
Kanban.
Oh no, there was someone's tool that you said you refer quite a bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to put that in the chat window now. So
okay,
Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting. So look at. I just need to make sure I'm spelling properly. I never learned how to type years ago. Big mistake. So now it takes me ages to write everything and then make mistakes. So I think I spelled it wrong as well. But I'll just so it's basically focusedobjective.com. It's Troy McGuinness's website. Focusedobjective.com. And also check out actionableagile.com, actionableagile.com.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I still made a mistake with my spelling. I'm trying to send it again, but it's a bit slow. Yeah, I made a typo. Sorry about that. Anything else, Imani?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll come
Thanks
back to you. Thank you. Monica, you're up.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Thanks. Yeah, good. I was thinking about balance of the workflow.
Yeah.
I'm not sure sometimes if it's better to how many tasks, for example, to have items, not tasks, to have in work in progress. For example, I am thinking more like a freelancer or one developer in the team from an individual point of view. If, for example, he is waiting, he has two items in progress, and he's waiting for one, and maybe in 1-2 days we'll get what he needs. But what shall it do? Start the other one, even if it takes more days, or it's kind of not sure how to balance sometimes, because always it takes sometimes to reconnect with the items and to what is needed to done.
Yeah, it's tricky. It depends on the situation. All things being equal, it can be very tempting to bring a new item in. So, but what you're doing is, I'll give you an example. So let's say I'm on a team, okay? And let's say we're on a team, yourself, Monica, Amani, Rajkumar, Matthew, myself, we're all on a team, Flavia, we're all on a team together. But everybody can see that I'm available for 2 hours. Okay? So if you had somebody who was really worried about me being idle, you'd give me some work to do for those 2 hours, because John, he's a lazy you-know-what, and we need to give him some work because he's costing us a fortune, so we need to keep him busy, right? And this can be a mistake a lot of the time, because unless I can get that work done in 2 hours without help from anybody, which is unusual, I would say, then what's likely to happen is I'm likely to overburden the entire team, because even though I was keeping myself busy, I've now brought the entire team over its whip limit. So what I would prefer to see is, if someone is idle, they spend some time doing some learning, or even better, they go and sit down with another person who's doing another piece of work. Or, you know what, you're waiting for, let's say I'm waiting for Amani, yeah? So instead of waiting for Amani, I'll go over and sit down next to Amani, and maybe I can learn some of what she does. We do a bit of swarming, and maybe my diverse thinking will help her to solve the problem. Maybe she's been bashing her head off a wall for 3 days and can't figure a way out of this. And then she just explains the problem to me, and then eureka, she understands what the problem is and she solves it. So my encouragement to you would be, instead of trying to keep the guy busy, would be to see, is there someone in the team he can help to get an item that we're already working on finished? Because, for example, on that workflow that we had a while ago, let me just change my camera here again. The older item needs some attention. Can he go back to that older item? Can he do some work on this one or this one? Or this one's blocked here, so can we help Amani to kind of to release this, so that we can actually work on it and get that done, and then therefore he should be able to get the work done. So it depends, right? So how long do you wait? You know what I mean? You have to use your own judgment on that. Yeah. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, very helpful. Thanks.
Okay, good. So I'm just checking the comments here as well, and I'm going to come back as well later on. Matthew, welcome. Thank you so much. So what Matthew has been asking, I just put the comment up on screen. I hope you don't mind, Matthew. Just stick it up there. So in this virtual and remote working era, what tools would I recommend to model the ever beautiful workflow? Sub in a workflow. I don't know what that means actually. So maybe you might want to join us so I can understand that a bit more. There's a URL on the page, so if you want to join. But what tools do I recommend? I use Kanbanize. I can share my screen here actually. So I just need to pick a tool. So I don't want window within a window, but basically if I just look here at Kanbanize, no, actually that's not going to work. Let me just try something else. 1 second there, Matthew. Sorry about that. I'm going to share a different screen now, so that wasn't a very good idea. So I'm just going to remove that and just try it once more. So share my screen, and here is here's my board. So it's fairly straightforward. As you can see at the top, this is for a training course I was delivering this morning. So I've got a funnel, backlog selected, and then you can see these are all the kind of stories, if you like, within each of the epics, if you like, and then they get to done, and you can see I'm breaching my limit, naughty John. And then you can compress that, and then these are all the stories. So what I like about Kanbanize is it gives me 2-level Kanban. You can do that as well with Swift Kanban. I haven't really been that impressed by the Microsoft as the DevOps Azure or Azure DevOps. I wasn't really impressed by the functionality available there, nor in Jira. But you can add Daniel Vicanti's actionable agile software. I put the link in one of the comments boxes there, so you can use that as well. And I really like Kanbanize. It's got the charts just come with it, and it's really cool. And Matthew, if I haven't answered your question, if you could just send me another comment to let me know, or you can just join us in video as well, just like Rajkumar, Amani, and Monica as well. So thank you for the question. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the flip chart now. So, and I'm going to stop the share of my screen. And thank you very much, Monica, for joining as well. Okay, so let's hide that. So back at the flip chart. So continuing with Kanban, the flow strategy. So I mentioned what the practices were already. And so we've kind of done that one to that. But now we need to talk about what are the measures, what are the basic measures of flow. So we kind of touched on Little's law a while ago. And so the basic measures of flow are work in progress, as in between these green lines here, how much work is actually in the system. Throughput, how many items are getting to done, or whatever the end of your workflow is getting to release or production, or whatever the end of your workflow is. And then work item age, so how old are each of these items? It's a really important one. You probably check that at if you have a daily meeting, you might check that at your daily. And then the cycle time, which is how long does an item take to get through that entire workflow. And it's just a reminder again, it's mandatory to record the start date and the finish date. You can have other measures, of course, that's fine, but these are the minimum ones that we need in Kanban, the flow strategy. In addition to that, there are some optional addendums. So if you're interested in TameFlow, I will be inviting the TameFlow folks onto one of these streams as well. So you can talk more about that on another live stream. Nexus and Less are scaling frameworks designed for Scrum. But actually, the way we wrote this, you could potentially use Nexus or Less for Kanban, the flow strategy, or more importantly for Kanban for complexity, which we're going to touch on next. And we also support evidence-based management from scrum.org. There's also loads of examples of different types of policies you might use. The only limit is your imagination, but there's loads of them that we came up with. Just be very, very careful. I've made the mistake many a time of designing a workflow for the team. And it might be a beautiful workflow, but if the team doesn't feel like they own it, it's no good. So you need to kind of really get the team to come up with their own workflow, then they'll review and improve it over time. It's not really in the team's interest if I give them a workflow that I think is the best workflow, if they don't own it, it's not going to work. So there's loads of ideas, but ultimately just kind of make sure the team is aware of these ideas, but they don't actually have to do those. Okay, and any more messages coming? There's a new comment coming in there, so I'm just going to check. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, cool. Just showing that there so everyone can see it. So also, you might have heard of flight levels. So Klaus Leopold is a really cool flight levels academy thing going on. I love the branding that goes behind that. It's really, really cool. So what I would say is that we don't not support flight levels, just like we don't not support TameFlow, NexusLess, evidence-based management. They will all of these different bodies of knowledge, if you like, will have their own additional content. But what we've done is we try to support it. We tried to give at least minimum support, and try not to be using language that was going too much against the grain. There will obviously still be some tensions in terms of certain lingo and so on, but overall we tried to do the best we could to kind of be lined up with TameFlow and with flight levels. So if, for example, in your organization you wanted to really teach people a simple version of Kanban, you could teach them Kanban the flow strategy, and then that still allows them to upgrade to flight levels or to TameFlow or to Kanban for complexity. So from one simple guide, you've got adaptability, so that depending on the teams you have in your company, they could be using a different type of Kanban, if that makes sense. So all going back to the bare minimum version, and then we're just upgrading additional functionality. And it means as well that we don't overload people with too much when we're training about Kanban first day. One other thing we often get asked about as well is, Scrum has values. Do we have any values? No, we don't have any values, and we don't have any principles. I wrote a joke on my website, a blog, ace.works/blog. I'll stick it on the comments window, and I put a little bad joke in there about all the Kanban methods going into a bar, and Kanban, the flow strategy, doesn't have any values and doesn't have any principles. I hope you enjoy that bad joke when you get to see it. And so we have to watch the time here. So what I want to just show you next is something that Imani mentioned earlier on, and I would like people to guess what this is. What is it? Any guesses? People who are online, people who are on the cameras as well. What do you think this is? Any guesses? What does it look like? Welcome, Matthew. Thank you. No guesses from anybody just yet? So I'm going to bring in Imani here just to have a bit of fun, if that's okay. Imani, any guesses?
Sorry, you know what? I had some connectivity issues. I've just come back on. It's terrible.
That's okay. So I'm just asking and just being a bit mean, just bringing it back in, but just having a bit of fun. But I put something on the flip chart, and I'm just curious if anybody knows what it is. What does it look like? And so Matthew says it's a playbook. Could be. Any guesses, Imani? So what does it look like to you? What do you recognize on it, I guess? Is there anything that you recognize that would be similar to other methods you would have seen?
Sorry, it's just come up.
So here, there's some kind of backlog thing going on. That seems to be Kanban in the middle, and it seems to be saying it can deal with complicated work, complex work, and chaotic work. There seem to be some kind of Kanban charts going on here, cycle time, scatter plot, and cumulative flow diagram. We're going to have great fun with those charts tomorrow if anybody wants to join me looking at those. And there's some kind of workflow going on here with work in progress limits, and they've got an SLE. But there seems to be some meetings going on. There's a meeting every day. Okay, I'll go to somebody else. So Monica, any guesses what this might be?
Could it be the the board, the project board for going in space, a moon or something?
So yeah, this is a board. This is definitely a board. Yeah, this piece here, absolutely. The bit where you see the workflow is absolutely, that's a board. Just here. But Matthew got it online. Matthew, well done. So it's a combination of Kanban and Kinevin. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about what will I call it, and I said I can't call it Kinevin, I mean, even though that would be a brilliant name, wouldn't it? Or Dave Snowden would sue me. I know, Dave. Sure, I'm only joking here, but you get. I think it'd be a bit too close to the bone, right? So, but this is Kanban for complexity. It looks very like Scrum, remarkably like Scrum. It has a review and a retrospective at the end. There's some kind of a cycle. We call it a rhythmic cycle. You can call it a sprint if you want to. People are used to calling these things sprints. Don't like the word sprint because it kind of gives the impression that we're running too fast and so on. But some kind of rhythmic cycle. There's a review, there's a retro, there's a daily meeting, and but this first meeting is optional. It's the replenisher meeting. You could replenish every day if you want to, of course. You don't necessarily need to, at the start of your rhythmic cycle, you don't necessarily need to have a planning or a replenishment session. And here what we're doing is we're showing the only two roles that are in. There are no roles in Kanban, the flow strategy, but in Kanban for complexity, there are two roles, servant and team. And that leads to a bit of a danger, actually, because when you've got a team, what do you mean? I mean, if you have a Scrum Master, that's actually a bonus. If you have one, I'm not saying you know that's not going to work. It would work. I mean, a Scrum Master would be ideal working on a team. The point is that across the team, you remember earlier we said we have these policies, and we say, well, Joe's going to look after the charts. Matthew's going to look after engaging stakeholders. Mary's going to look after preparing for the sprint review. The rhythmic cycle review. Freudian slip there. And you get the idea. So what you do is the team will be very specific about who's doing what. Because I have this worry that if everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. So you're just extending the idea of workflow policies. There's workflow policies here for exit criteria out of each active state, and there's work in progress limits and replenishment policy, pull or move policy. But you can also have policies for who's doing what. Now, I'm not talking about erasing metrics because that's a little bit too tight. We want a little bit of fuzziness. So it might be 2 or 3 people are responsible for engaging stakeholders. It could be everybody, but there's somebody on the hook. There's somebody worried the most about it. And what I did here as well is in Scrum, for example, they have a vision, don't they, for the product. Of course, this backlog isn't necessarily for a product, but let's say it was for a product. What I find is that people struggle with vision. And of course, in Kinevin, we don't use the expression vision. We talk about a direction of travel. We're going in a particular direction, okay? And so the metaphor I like to use is what's our almost impossible perfection vision? So Mars might be 5+ years, kind of Elon Musk type dreamer, real visionary type person. And then the moon, metaphorically, is like 1 to 3 years, typically 1 year, because we tend to go on annual cycles, unfortunately. So, and then getting into orbit, so this is supposed to be planet Earth, getting into orbit is supposed to be like 3 to 6 months. So what I do is I come up with a different direction of travel depending on the time horizon. So 5+ years, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 months. So if you're on the development team and you're really into what do we do in the next couple of months, then you're going to be looking at this direction of travel. If you're maybe the servant, you might be looking at this direction of travel. If you're kind of Elon Musk kind of character, you might be looking at this direction of travel. So there is a different direction of travel depending on the time horizon that you resonate most with. And so the team is aiming towards that, moving work off the backlog. So there's no concept of a rhythmic cycle goal or a sprint goal, because we see that as too short-term thinking. So instead, what we have is you're aiming for your 3 to 6 month target condition. You'd see kind of elements of Toyota Kata here as well. So this is actually Kanban for complexity. And instead of using the Scrum values, what we try to do is we try to avoid the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You might have heard of Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So what we try to do is we try to aim for the antithesis of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So starting with trust and going through the various other dysfunctions of a team. So so we kind of had a more 21st century slant really on kind of what kind of behaviors we'd expect. And I guess they're like values through the back door. Kanban, the flow strategy, doesn't have values or principles, but these would be tenets that we'd expect a team to avoid. We'd expect the team to avoid those 5 dysfunctions. The leader could be a product owner, could be an executive, could be a member of the team. We're not really specific about that. There's no scrum master, and this works really well when the cycle time of your team is longer than 30 days. If it's less than 30 days, you might just want to use Scrum because Scrum is well established. Everybody knows what it is. If your cycle time is more like 100 days or 100 days plus, you might want to look at something like this, particularly if you're in the complex space or even the chaotic space. You might need something, because if you just use Kanban, the flow strategy, you'd probably be able to operate in the clear or complicated spaces, but would struggle a bit in the complex space or the chaotic space. At least that's my opinion. So that is Kanban, the flow strategy. So Monica, what are your comments on that one? What do you think of Kanban, the flow strategy?
Pardon? Sorry.
That's okay, no worries. I'll ask Manny. Manny, what do you think of that? You're on mute.
Yes, really interesting. Definitely want to read up more about it and look into it.
Good, good.
I like the idea. I mean, I think I just hit the point where you said if the cycle time is larger than 30 days, obviously the guidelines around Scrum is, product increment, no more than 4 weeks or something like that, the iteration anyway. So, I think that sounds really interesting. So I definitely want to read up a little bit more, and hopefully I can come back to you if I have any further questions.
Yeah, no worries. Feel free to ping me, and thank you everybody for joining. I'm just going to ask if there's any more comments or questions from anybody. Thank you very much, Amani, for coming on live. And thank you, Monica, also. Thank you so much. Okay, so Matthew, thank you as well very much for picking up that this was Kanban. Really cool, thank you. So we just got a comment from Matthew. And there's another reason as well why I came up with this, because Scrum is, it was focused on software in 2017. They kind of opened it up a bit into non-software, didn't they? And who knows, maybe they'll open up it more. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. But Kanban, the flow strategy, is not necessarily aimed at software. It's aimed at knowledge work. I've used it in various sectors already, because I've been kind of doing this. Even though I only wrote the guide last year, I'd actually been practicing this since 2016 in various sectors. And Daniel Vicanti had been doing something similar as well. So we can stand over certain sectors that we've used it in, and so those industries are mentioned in the guide. We're not saying you can't use them in other sectors. We're just saying we haven't tested on those yet. We don't want to be saying this is the panacea for all ills. It will solve world hunger and COVID-19. We're not saying that. We're just saying we've tried it in certain industries, seem to work. You can give it a go, give it a shot. And there will be more in this space as well over the coming months. So I hope you stay tuned to Kanban, the flow strategy, kanbanguys.org. Thank you very much for your comments, Matthew. Lovely to see you again on this channel. Thank you. So I think we are almost done. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining. Thank you also the people who commented and the people who came live on the stream. Really, really appreciate that you did that. Looking forward to seeing some of you again tomorrow. We're going to play Advanced Feature Ban. Thank you so much for your time, and have a lovely Easter if I don't see you before then. Thank you. Over and out. Bye-bye.